Meghan McCain recently left The View. She wrote a book, and Ben Burgess, Professor Ben Burgess, columnist for Jacobin, did the dirty work and read it. You do this a lot. You read Glenn Beck. You are willing to read this garbage, aren't you?
Yeah, no, I should. I don't know how many medals I deserve for reading it. It's a pretty short book, but I did read it. So it's called Bad Republican, and it's basically her memoir of the last few years and how she feels like she's been horribly mistreated by everyone.
Right. So tell us what's in the book. Is there anything in the book that is remotely sympathetic?
Yeah. So, one thing I say in the review is I think that the writing style here is, and I actually think she probably did write it herself, or at least there's a good chance, because like there's nothing in it that makes me think otherwise. Let me put it that way. So,
her husband
is Ben Domenech, who's the founder of the Federalist.
Right.
So yeah, the book covers her relationship with Ben Domenech and marrying him and having their child Liberty, and it covers the Trump presidency and COVID and her years on The View and all of that. And I think that because her writing style seems to have been gotten frozen in 2008, where real heads may remember that she was in 2008.
She was cool.
Yeah, she was great. She had a blog. It was called McCain Bloggette. It was supposed to humanize her dad while he was running for president. And her writing style really does seem to have gotten frozen in like the sort of 2008 blogging era. And it's very unfiltered, right? No detail is too embarrassing to include. And I think that the best thing you can say about it is that it's very raw and vulnerable, which means that when she's describing her dad, John McCain, getting cancer and dying, that like even somebody like me who sees John McCain as a war criminal and strongly suspects that the most important difference between the Trump administration and the hypothetical McCain administration is that John McCain would have been more likely to invade Iran. But even I found that part kind of moving, right? I mean, that made me feel some sympathy for her, because as much as I think that he was an objectively awful human being, right? Like, look, he's her dad. She loved him. He got brain cancer. It's a horrible thing. Now, that said, the problem is she's every bit as raw and vulnerable when she's describing her nonsensical sense of aggrievement at, the New York, media world and her ex-colleagues and the nurses in the maternity ward who made her feel judged and the students at Reed College who were mean to her in the Q&A and, all of this stuff, right? Like, no matter, like she's the sort of level of like, oh, poor me is like constant, throughout the entire thing, So she has, for example, like I'll just give you really briefly, well, there's so much to choose from, but one of my favorite examples, which is in the summer of 2020, Meghan and her husband, Ben Domenech, were riding out the pandemic in Virginia, but she still maintained the apartment in New York. And as the riots were going on, she tweets the following: "My neighborhood in Manhattan is eviscerated and looks like a war zone. De Blasio and Cuomo are an utter disgrace. This is not America. Our leaders have abandoned us and continue to let great American cities burn to the ground and be destroyed. I never could have fathomed this." And then there's this writer there's like a Samantha Bee writer, Kristen Bartlett, who quote tweets her with a single sentence, which is, "Meghan, we live in the same building, and I just walked outside. It's fine."
Right. I remember that.
And Meghan McCain writes about this thing as if it were a traumatic experience, that she says she had to like break, they were still maintaining that apartment, but she had to like break her lease and move all her stuff out and never return to New York again because it was so terrible that this TV writer quote tweeted her and said something snarky and like, however many thousands of people liked or retweeted it. Because the way she describes it is as if she were being doxxed by the act of this person saying she lived in the same building, which is confusing because that assumes that we all know where Kristen Bartlett lives.
Right.
But like she has to find some way to cast it as a traumatic event. And similarly, right, like earlier in the book, she's describing this ordeal that she had, the Seth Meyers show, where Meyers was grilling her about comments she made about Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, smearing Omar as an anti-Semite, and even though Megyn is the one in this equation who's like throwing around accusations of bigotry in much the same way that she would complain about that she was on the other foot, her description of this is like, this is such a horrible traumatic thing that Seth Meyers was so mean to her that she vowed to like never go on late night TV again. And I watched the clip because I was thinking, okay, how bad, like, man, what did Seth Meyers do to her? And I guess what he did is he brought it up more times than she was comfortable with, or like he didn't let go of the question. But his word choices are extremely polite. Tone of his voice is very mild. About the worst thing he says about her is that she was being a little unfair. That was the phrase, a little unfair to Ilhan Omar. But like, it's hard to overstate how traumatic she represents this as being. She actually says in the book that her initial impulse was to blame her miscarriage shortly afterward on how mean Seth Meyers was to her in that interview.
Hey, maybe Seth Meyers could get hired to visit women in Texas.
Sure. So
I would do that to make a little money. I would travel through Texas
and just give them traumatic interviews as a legal workaround to anti-abortion laws. Yeah. And then my very favorite example is she's, at one time she used to go around and speak on college campuses, but she says her career speaking at college campuses came to a screeching halt in 2012 at Reed College. Since she agreed to speak there, she realized how liberal it would be. And she showed up and she gave her speech, which is about her career and the lack of real discourse between blah, 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 blah. Right. And as far as I could tell from her description, there wasn't even a protest, right? Nobody heckled her. Everybody clapped politely when she was done talking. But the Q&A session was so horrible she could never go to another college again. And what she describes in the Q&A session is basically sounds like people asking her somewhat tough questions about taxes and stuff on the assumption that she would know the answers, which of course she didn't. Right. And she actually says at one point, this is possibly my favorite sentence in the book, although there's a lot of competition. That's
great.
Actually, no, my favorite sentence in the book is the one where she describes her job at The View, which, remember, this is a job expressing political opinions on daytime television as spiritually, mentally, and physically exhausting. But one of my favorites is when she says that, so she advocated flat taxes and a balanced budget in her, answer to the question, Reed College. And then she said she was asked a complicated question about this. She doesn't say what the question is. I suspect, she doesn't strike me as a reliable narrator. So,
right.
But she was asked supposedly a very complicated question about this. And possibly it was something like how many people would die if we had to slash the social safety net to the point where we could have both of those things. But in any case, she was asked a complicated question and she said she didn't understand. And then another student got up and said, well, how could you come and opine about these things if you don't actually know about them? And I don't know if she used this line at Reed College, but in the book, she compares this to say that you can't have a favorite baseball team if you don't know all of the players' batting averages, which I think is pretty amazing if you just kind of sit with that analogy for a second. Because she's not even comparing political commentary to sports commentary. right? Like I'm pretty, I'm pretty sure even, like, okay, look, I'm sure even Skip Bayless doesn't know every single player's, averages, et cetera, off the top of his head. Maybe he does, but maybe he doesn't, right? But I don't think an audience of undergraduates could embarrass him if he was on their campus to talk about baseball. And it's just such an awesomely like shallow. It's like, well, if you're just like a casual fan of this analogy, why is anybody hearing from you? Why are you on television? Why do you have a column at the Daily Mail? Why were you in this like co-host this prominent show for 4 years? But it really is telling, because like elsewhere in the book, she makes a big deal about how much she doesn't like Trump, right? She goes on and on about how she doesn't like Trump. And, she says when people are mean to her, she says, well, they're taking out their frustrations with Trump on me, even though I'm anti-Trump. She says she voted against Trump. And, whatever. I lived in a swing state, I voted for Biden too. I guess Meghan McCain and I voted the same way. But like, I have to say, if I were a Republican, I'd be reading this and think, oh my God, why are you voted for Democrats? Why exactly? Because she doesn't actually seem to have any policy criticisms of Trump. She, the only policy thing she mentions, I mean, she praises the Supreme Court appointments. She praises him for moving the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Like, I don't know what the policy complaints are about Trump. It seems like the reason she doesn't like Trump is that he's crude and crass and embarrassing to, civilized Republicans like her. And he was mean to her dad.
I don't know about you, but I don't like my heroes getting captured or something like that. Trump said that.
Yeah. I prefer, I don't think that makes you a hero. I think he said, I prefer people who don't get captured. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Well, I was just going to say though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just running with the casual baseball fan analogy. If you're just a casual baseball fan and you don't like the new coach, then reasons about this superficial are kind of fine, right? Why not, right? But like, this is somebody who's hired to talk about politics for a living, and like, her political allegiances are based on the fact that like this dude and her dad didn't get along, and like he says a bunch of crass things on Twitter, and I don't know, it's kind of revealing. Like, I don't think she actually knows anything about almost any of this stuff. I mean, I think that she actually quotes in that Reed College, just to wrap that up. I mean, in that Reed College thing, she quotes this girl in the audience who got up and had this line, which was so good, I just had to use this as the final sentence of the review, which was just, this is a comment, not a question. You're only here because of your dad. And all I could think is like, yeah, that is the ultimate summary of not only this book, but the entire career, the entire life trajectory of Meghan McCain. You're only here because of your dad.
Right. When Trump was running for before, I think, but even before he actually declared officially, he did an interview in Iowa with, who's the guy with the toupee? Joseph Goebbels. No, Frank Luntz.
There we go.
And he said, I don't know about, but how can you make fun of John McCain? He's a war hero. I don't know about you, but my war heroes don't get captured. So that was considered offensive.
Sure.
The media never, it's like you can't question John McCain's war record in America. Earlier, you called John McCain a war hero. Was he committing a war crime when he got?
A war criminal is what I called him. Yeah,
war crime before he got shot down.
Yeah, I mean, look, he was a volunteer at an elite level, right? As the officer, he was a volunteer in an imperial war of aggression. I mean, I think that the way we feel about John McCain should be at least the way we feel about like a Russian officer who gets shot down over Mariupol, who is while they're engaged in indiscriminate bombing, especially if in this scenario the invasion of Ukraine had been going on not for a couple months but for like a few years, and he was volunteering specifically knowing that he was going there, right? That doesn't mean you can't feel bad for him for just on a human level.
But he was attacking civilians.
Yeah, no, I mean, he was, I mean, look, the bombs don't magically distinguish right? Who's who, right? I mean, they just kill everybody in the vicinity, and this is definitely like the American strategy in Vietnam. Was definitely to just like pulverize the shit out of the country with like this just amazing amount of explosive material. I mean, there are famously more bombs dropped in Vietnam than like all of Europe or World War II, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, so it's like
But not
given
lots.
given that there's just no way to be discriminate.
Right. Hey, I think George W. Bush has something to say about that.
And brutal invasion of of Ukraine.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that. That is some
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Vicky Eisman. So I want to ask you about Vicky Eisman, who was the lobbyist that John McCain was stooping lead up to the campaign with Barack Obama. And and he denied it, right? He denied that he had an affair with Vicky Eisman, but Steve Schmidt says that's a lie. Wasn't Steve Schmidt working for John McCain, right?
Yeah. He's like most of the rats. He's abandoned the GOP since then. But
and he's one of the Lincoln.
Yeah, he's one of those guys.
Yeah.
And by the way, Steve Schmidt has some funny stuff to say about Meghan McCain. That he was that like he said that she had to be kicked off of the campaign bus basically for bratty behavior, and he was breaking the news to her mom, Cindy McCain, who started crying and said, I've raised two wonderful sons, meaning like, it's okay if one of the kids isn't done, at least I raised two wonderful sons, which is on Mother's Day, actually, Steve Schmidt related that story in a tweet to Meghan McCain. So
bad Republican.
By the way, your mom did love you, is just as, anyway.
This review of Bad Republican appears in Jacobin, where you're a columnist.
Yeah, the review is called Meghan McCain, Fail Daughter, and it came out today.
Right. AIPAC. Earlier, I was talking about AIPAC.
Yeah.
It's a third rail in politics, not because people love AIPAC. They're afraid of criticizing AIPAC. You cannot criticize AIPAC, otherwise you're accused of anti-Semitism. To which I invite people to accuse me of anti-Semitism. Knock yourself out. What are we going to do about AIPAC? They don't represent Israel. They don't represent American Jews. They really represent the war-making machinery on this planet, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing, right? Because this is a lot of what, like one of the things that Gadi Ilhan Omar accused me of an anti-Semite was saying it's all about the Benjamins, meaning like this money that AIPAC and other pro-Israel lobbying groups spend has an effect. And it just seems like a very weird thing because, like, there are lots of lobbies that have an effect on American foreign policy, and in none of the others is this taboo against sort of admitting that all this money and time and effort that's put into lobbying efforts actually pays off, that it actually has some influence. Because it'd be weird if it didn't. I mean, if it didn't, I don't understand why they would bother. The same way that like the right-wing Cuban American groups in Miami that lobby for harsher Cuba policy clearly had an effect that like decades and decades after the opening to China, right? We still had the embargo on Cuba. The same way the Saudi lobby in Washington D.C. Clearly has an effect. I mean, I think that I think that the sort of hesitance about saying that in AIPAC, and of course this is definitely weaponized by AIPAC and their defenders, is that, if put wrong, right? I mean, it sort of rhymes with something that actually would be anti-Semitic, which is saying like, powerful Jews are controlling everything, right? Like that actually would be anti-Semitic, but like just saying that lobbying works, should not be anti-Semitic in the case of this one particular lobby, right? I mean, I don't understand the reasoning there at all, right? I mean, like that this is something nobody denies in any other context, right? It's kind of silly to treat it as being out of bounds in in this context, right? I mean, if what people are saying is it doesn't work, then man, I hope none of these people saying this allow their friends or relatives to donate money to any groups like this. I hope they.
No, I don't think friends. I don't think AIPAC gets any donations from anybody other than, like Sheldon, the casino man. I don't think mom and
okay. So why aren't Sheldon Adelstein must have friends, right? He must have a family. Why aren't they warning him not to waste his money on this?
Right. I know. We have to wrap it up. Professor Ben Burgis, where are you teaching before we plug your books and publications?
Morehouse College is where I'm teaching.
And that's fantastic. And you're the host of Give Them an Argument. You're a columnist for Jacobin. And you are also, you write for the Daily Beast. Who else are you writing for these days?
Those are the two main ones, Jacobin and the Daily Beast. There's an article every once in a while in The Nation and every once in a while in Current Affairs, but the main ones are Jacobin and the Daily Beast. I should say, by the way, that there is also another Jacobin article that just came out, which is which is about the baby formula crisis and arguing that the that the federal government should nationalize production of that. Since
Biden must have read that.
Yeah, there you go.
I was hoping you were going to say about the baby formula shortage, which I support. I was hoping.
Yeah, I support. I want to starve those babies. Well, Pete Buttigieg came close to that. He said, "This is a capitalist country. The government doesn't manufacture baby formula, nor should it." Right. This is before Biden invoked the.
He said that.
Yeah, this is before Biden invoked the Defense Protection Act, Defense Production Act. But Pete Buttigieg did say that, which is like the sacred principles of the free market are such that, look, what's a few babies starving here and there, as compared to to protecting the wall of separation between government and the economy.
I wonder if McKinsey had a contract with Nestle. Remember Nestle was starving?
It's entirely possible, yeah.
Remember Nestle starved all those African women? And your new book is Christopher Hitchens, What He Got Right, How He Went Wrong, and Why He Still Matters. Go buy the book. It gets the Feldman guarantee. Thank you, Professor.
All right. Thank you, comedian.